Well, on that subject of policy initiatives, things that we can be doing now, in addition to open primaries and ranked choice voting, which we should point out, I can't remember whether you said it or not, these are ballot initiatives. They don't require legislative action. So these are things that can actually happen on the state level and make a real difference in the immediate future. But in addition to that, a huge piece of your platform with the Forward Party is this idea of human-centered capitalism, right? Like the idea that we need to reconfigure our economy so that it is not so hyper-focused on GDP and start taking care of the people as opposed to just making sure that the economy is churning and using that to over-index on how we're actually doing as a country.
Yeah, if you look at the measurements around such basic things as infant mortality, quality drinking water access, public education, life expectancy, the United States is 28th in the world on those measurements, worse for some of them. And that's been declining over the last number of years. One of the cases I was making when I ran for president is like, look, like our quality of life is sinking into the mud. People are getting increasingly angry and distraught and resentful. So that's what we should be investing in. And my prescription at the time was we should give everyone $1,000 a month. And I think that would help a great deal. But equally important is for us to focus on the right measurements, because if you're an operator, as I am, if you have the wrong measurements, you're going to head in the wrong direction. And right now, we're pretending things are good while people's quality of life just gets worse and worse. So we should be centering our sense of progress around how our kids are doing, our health, our mental health, our environmental quality. And then if those things decline, then you can look up and say, wow, we're really doing poorly, as opposed to right now saying, well, we must be doing okay because GDP is up, stock market prices are at record highs. And there's a certain subset of us that are doing well in terms of the financial returns.
Other than UBI, which you've spoken about at length many, many times, obviously, what are some other ways that we can address the growing wealth disparity and this gap, which feels like the real engine behind the division that gets played out in the media and in politics?
Yeah, the simplest explanation for what's going on in our country is that if you destroy a middle class, then you become subject to all sorts of terrible impulses and ideas. And our middle class has been getting decimated for decades, starting in the mid-'70s, around when I was born, actually. I was born in 75. I spent 6 years running an entrepreneurship organization because I thought the way that we could remedy this is to have people starting businesses and growing businesses all over the country. And I realized that the scope of my work was going to be far too small to try to remedy the problem in question. So if you're going to try and rebuild the middle class, it's a massive project. But there are three main things that make Americans sad in terms of their costs: education, healthcare, and housing. Each of those has gone up in price much, much more so than incomes, for one, but also than the consumer goods or media or other things that we consume. So if you were to want to try and make things better in America, you would find ways to deliver healthcare more cost effectively. You'd find ways to make education less costly, and you'd try and keep the housing prices and costs under control.
So from the inception of this conversation around UBI that you helped pioneer, and now is by dint of the pandemic actually has been tested, how has your perspective on UBI evolved or changed since those early days during the presidential campaign?
We're living through now real-time experiments with UBI at scale, which in some ways is very exciting. The biggest component is the child tax credit that has lifted millions of kids and families out of poverty. It's made people better able to learn. It's put food on the table. 442 economists, including Nobel Prize winners, recently signed a letter saying, keep the child tax credit because it's the best thing we have done in a long time. So that's a component that I think people are very excited about and confident in. The other component around unemployment relief has had very, very mixed effects, in large part because we've tied the money to not working. And I'm around 26-year-olds who say to me, look, I'm getting 80% of what I was making not working. So I'm not going to do anything until this train runs out.
I know a bunch of those people.
And then only then will I turn around and start looking for a job. And I look at them and I say, that's entirely reasonable and rational. Like, who would make a different decision? So if we're going to put money into people's hands, we should not be attaching it to not working. That's one of the big lessons that I think people should take from this time.
Mm-hmm.